The field of Republican candidates running for the chance to take on incumbent Congressman Chris Pappas seems to keep growing. The 1st District has flipped between parties over the past couple decades, and one of the people hoping to flip it back to the GOP is Gilead Town. He's our guest this morning. Gilead, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, first, let's just get to know you a little bit. Tell us about yourself and why you're running.
Yeah, so I've lived in New Hampshire my entire life. I grew up 29 years in Derry, and I recently moved to Salem. I think there's a tremendous demand for a candidate who is honest and trustworthy, maybe someone from outside the political arena. So I think I can offer people that.
You mentioned being outside the political arena. You've worked in the jewelry and watch industry. Why leave the private sector for politics?
Well, that wouldn't be my dream scenario, but I think there's a tremendous need in this country for people of integrity to step up and lead. I think I'm certainly capable of doing that. I'm very happy with my career right now, and quite frankly, it's very comfortable for me. But I've talked to people that are close to me, and they think that I'm making the right decision to give this a shot. And I think at this stage in my life, it's probably the best chance I have to do it. I think I have more energy and than I've ever had. So I'm going to give it a shot.
And I do want to ask, we did check out your social media pages, and since you've announced that you're running, you haven't been posting a lot on social media about your campaign. So where is your focus right now, and what is your approach to this primary?
Yeah, so I work a full-time job, and so I don't have as much time as maybe some of the other candidates. I will be ramping up my social media presence more. I'm a firm believer that you win the race really towards the end of the campaign. But my focus right now has been talking to people directly, kind of like a direct sales type of mentality, except in the campaign. And I find that's very effective. I don't think you can, social media is certainly great, and I'll be doing more of it, but I don't think you can really get to know people on an intimate basis through social media. They can't really get your full character. So I'm doing a lot of direct outreach, and so far I'm pleased, and we'll see where it goes.
Sure. One of your opponents in this primary says that former President Trump really won the 2020 election. Do you agree?
Well, it's impossible to say for sure what happened. I just think there was a lot of red flags, which were evidence for fraud, quite frankly. The way the whole election went down, I don't feel comfortable with it. You can't say for sure. I wasn't there at all the polling locations, but I think there's a lot of red flags that indicate that something wrong happened. So I think our election system needs a lot of improvement. At this point, the best thing we can do is move forward, and that's what we have to do. But I think there's reason for a lot of people to have doubts about the election system.
I want to follow up on that. The former president contends with no evidence that there was widespread voting fraud in New Hampshire in November. Governor Chris Sununu says that's just not true. So who do you agree with here in regards to widespread fraud in New Hampshire, Trump or Sununu?
Well, I wouldn't want to put one against the other. In my opinion, New Hampshire, I was on the ground in New Hampshire. I was not surprised at the outcome of the election in New Hampshire. If I were to say what I think, I don't think New Hampshire was a center for voter fraud. I can't say that would be the case with some of the other states, but New Hampshire, I think, in my opinion, had fair elections.
What kind of election reform do you think is needed across the country?
Well, I think voter ID is a must. I think it goes without saying. You need an ID to do everything else important in your life. I just don't see why this wouldn't be widely accepted. There's election fraud in many countries, and I think everybody agrees on that. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that it wouldn't come to this country.
I want to switch gears now. Is the Republican Party still the party of Trump, and how do you think he will influence the 2022 elections?
Well, he is the most influential person in the Republican Party. So I would, if we put it that way, I would say, yes, it is the party of Donald Trump. I am not running. I supported President Trump in the primary in 2015. I've been a supporter of his ever since. I like the fact that he's not a political insider. At this stage of his life, I don't think he had anything to gain out of this his running for office. But in my campaign, I'm not running on his coattails, although I certainly have no problem supporting him or saying that I supported him. I want to do my own thing. And but to answer your question, I think he is the most influential person in the Republican Party.
You know, CD1 flips between the GOP and Democrats. It's a very purple district, perhaps one of the most purple districts in the country. But there seems to be continued discord in Congress. Very few ideas are made into bipartisan legislation. The language can get very toxic. So is bipartisanship a false promise now?
Well, it has been a false promise. It shouldn't be. And I think unity, this country needs unity. You can agree to disagree, but what we see in Congress is just very inflammatory. That goes on both sides, Republicans and Democrats. I would hope not to be like that. At some point, you have to work with the other side. You have to respect people from all perspectives. I don't see a lot of that in the Republican Party. I think in this race, I may be the most, not the most moderate, but the most unifying, and that is desperately needed in this country. We cannot continue to go forward as a country in the state that we're at.
If elected, how would you work with the other side of the aisle to try to get things done?
Well, you can work with their voter base. So I would have absolutely no problem going into places like Manchester or even the Seacoast, which normally vote Democrat, and talking to those people and listening to them. That's something I think the Republican Party has not been able to do for whatever reason. Maybe they don't have the right candidates for it. You lead by example. You need to unify by leading by example. There's obviously certain policies that I would never stand for, and that makes it tough. I mean, we need the other side to step up as well. But inflammatory language and pitting people against each other, you're either a mask person or a no mask person, all this kind of stuff, you can say that across many different topics. It's just not healthy for this country. We cannot continue to be divided.
One of your priorities is cutting government spending, but we've heard both parties say they want to get the debt and deficit under control for years now, and then neither do. So is this a campaign promise that isn't realistic?
Well, one congressperson couldn't possibly, cut government spending. But if enough people with, mentality like this were to be elected, then yes, you could make an impact. Government spending is extremely wasteful. I mean, nobody would run their personal finances the way that the way that Congress spends money. I think the biggest problem when people get into office is a lot of these funds are going to people that they know, and very wasteful and very inefficiently spent money. And some of those people help them get elected. I mean, it's all connected. So you have people that are basically groomed in the political system, Republican or Democrat. They get into Congress and they're incentivized really to spend lots of money and really getting little return. Even this $1 trillion infrastructure package, that if someone was spending their own personal wealth, you could make that stretch 50 times farther. That's hyperbole. Then what this is going to do? The answer isn't spend more money. The answer is spend money wisely.
What would you cut if you were elected, and where would you focus the spending?
Well, I'm not necessarily, I am open for cutting, but I think we need to, it's like negotiating. You don't go buy a used car for more than a new car. I mean, that's just a silly example, but everything costs way too much, and there's a reason for that. Nobody questions any of these bills as to where the money's going. So at the very least, if we're going to allocate money for anything, we need to know how it's being spent and what are we getting in return for it. It shouldn't cost, millions and millions of dollars to do very simple things, and in many cases, not even effective things. So I just think you need a shrewd business mind that is not going to be connected to the system on the budget. And you need as many eyes as possible.
All right, Gilead Town, Republican candidate for CD1. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.